Starting this step, let's look at content negotiation. What is content negotiation and why do we need it for our REST API? Typically, whenever we talk about REST resources, the same resource has the same URI. Whenever we talk about users, it is localhost 8080/users. So a specific resource has a specific URI. However, different representations are possible. I might want to get the user details in JSON format. Some other consumer might expect the response back in an XML format. So for the same resource, you might have different representations that are possible. So you can have expectations that you might be having different content types, XML or JSON. Or you might even be expecting the response back in a different language. If this response has some text, for example, you might want to expose the same resource in multiple different languages: English, Dutch, German, French, whichever language you would want to support. So for the same resource, for the same URI, you might have different representations. You might want to send the response back in different formats or in different languages. And your consumers need to tell you which representation they want. How can a consumer tell the REST API provider which representation they would want? That's where this term called content negotiation comes into picture. A consumer can use things like accept header. When I'm sending a request, I can send a request with a MIME type of application XML. So I can create an accept header with the value application XML and say, I would want an XML response back. Or I can use application/JSON. This is to get a JSON response back. Another example is to make use of the accept language header. As part of your request, in the headers, you can add a header called accept language. And you can tell, I would want English, or I would want Dutch, or I would want French. So basically, what we are talking about is the fact that for the same resource, you might have different representations. And in content negotiation, what happens is the consumer and the service provider negotiate with each other. The consumer tells the content provider what kind of representation they would want. I would want XML response or JSON response, or I would want the text back in Dutch language. And this is typically done using your request headers. In this step, let's focus on accept header. Let's add XML representations for our resources. As you would expect with Spring Boot, it's very, very easy. All that you need to do is to go to your pom.xml and add in a simple dependency. The group ID of the dependency is com, faster XML, Jackson, data format, and the artifact ID is Jackson-data format-XML. So go ahead and save this. And I would actually stop the server and I would need to start it again. So whenever we make a change in the dependencies in the pom.xml, you need to restart the server to pick it up. I would go over to our Talent API tester. I would go and check out our earlier request to get all the users. So I'll click this. I'll say continue. So we have a GET request going into http://localhost 8080/users. Let's do a send. You can see that by default, we are getting the response back in JSON format. Let's now add in a header. I'll say accept and application/XML and say send. You can see that now the application is responding back with a XML response. And the only thing that we needed to do to enable this was to add in a simple dependency into our pom.xml. Com faster XML Jackson data format, Jackson data format XML. So once you add this dependency in, whenever a user adds an accept header with application/XML, in that kind of scenario, we would be sending an XML response back. If users want a JSON response, they can actually send a accept header, application JSON, and send it. In that kind of scenario, you'd get a JSON response back. So for the same user resource, what we are doing is we are creating two different representations. We are creating a JSON representation as well as an XML representation. Now, the XML representation and the Swagger documentation can cause a few problems when we are playing with a few of the other advanced features. So what I'll do now is I'll comment them out. So I'll go ahead, comment these dependencies out. And what I'll do is also stop and start the server up. So we remove the dependencies and started the server up. In this step, we played around with the first part of content negotiation, making use of accept headers to either send a XML response or a JSON response. In next step, let's look at accept language header. How can you use accept language header to send responses back in different languages? I'm sure you're having a wonderful time, and I'll see you in the next step.